From growing up in poverty in rural Louisiana to becoming a CEO and international speaker, Dawn's story is a testament to God's power to redeem every chapter of our lives. And best-selling author Laura Wifler joins us to share the story inspired by a poem to her 8-year-old daughter. Laura reminds little girls everywhere that the same God who created the stars also formed them. Let's go. Welcome to Unscripted Faith. Y'all, did you catch it? Did you catch it? Do you like the mug? Because I do. New season, new things, okay? Listen, I am so excited you joined me today. And as always, our guests are phenomenal. You are going to glean so much from their testimonies. And as we know, the power of the blood and the power of the testimony makes us more than overcomers. Dawn Cazedessus' story didn't start as a success. Growing up in rural Louisiana, she had to overcome poverty, abuse, failing more than succeeding, and finding the God-given resilience to keep moving forward. She is now a CEO and international speaker, and we are delighted to welcome Dawn to Unscripted Faith.
So excited to be here and honored to be a part of this community.
We are excited to have you, girl, and we have got to dive into your story. So take us to that little girl growing up in rural Louisiana and how she met Jesus.
Well, you know, it really started off with my mom was 15 years old when she became pregnant for me. And as the stats tell us, typical teenage pregnancies lead to poverty. So that led us straight into the trailer park and 2 more kids after me. And so that led to a hard life. And when I was 17 years old, I physically left the trailer park. And I went off to the university. But I realized later on in my life that while I physically left, I did not mentally leave that trailer park. And so I went on a journey of really looking like, how can I actually transform who I am? And I did all the things that normal people do. I worked hard. I tried to grit my way through life, and I came up empty. And that is where the Lord really got a hold of me, because it was, you know, that good old Sunday morning hymn that got me. It was, I surrendered it all. And I was at the end. I was trying everything that I could to make my life full. And I just kept coming up empty. And when I heard that hymn, I literally surrendered it all. And that is where Jesus got me.
Wow. And how old were you when that happened?
So I was a senior in college, and so I was at 21 years old, literally graduating college, trying to figure out my next. And that's what happens to most of us, isn't it? It's when we start thinking about the future, we're wondering what the next is going to be. And the next was just pressure on me. And I was just sitting there trying to find answers. And the whole time, I felt like I was like in this washing machine, just going round and round and round. And I wasn't coming out clean.
Wow.
And it wasn't until Jesus got a hold of me and was like, I have the answers. You're on the wrong path. Psalm 119, 105. I love this verse because he says that he shines a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. And I was on the wrong path because I was following the wrong light. And it was only because I was living mentally still in a trailer park of abuse and addictions and all the things that was coming with poverty. And it wasn't until I started seeing his light that I could follow the path that he had for me.
Wow. Now, let me ask you, as that little girl, how did you endure and really survive such difficult circumstances?
Yeah. So I actually wrote a book about it in Trailer Park CEO, the 12 cornerstones to becoming a godly woman of influence. And the reason I wrote that book is because when I was a little girl, I would escape the chaos of the trailer and the trailer park, and I'd go into nature. And there was these woods that was behind us, and I would go collect stones, go pick up the rocks, and I started just lining those rocks up, and I would create a path. And I start creating these trails in the woods, and that would be my little safe spot. That would be where I would escape. And I know now that God was with me on every single hike that I did as a little girl because he protected me. He would guide me. I just didn't know him like I know him now, but
Wow.
he was there. And so for me, it was just that, picking up those stones and laying them down and just, finding that safe space that I could be in during that time.
Wow, it's so beautiful because, like you said, as a kid, you're just exploring nature and doing these things. You're lining up these little stones, but you found safety. You met the fortress there, so to speak. You didn't recognize him as him, but you met safety there. So, after you give your life to the Lord at 21, how did your life change?
Well, it was a messy life at that point because as we all are, we're such a mess, right? And so I was a mess and I had to literally pivot and go in a completely different direction. And I had to say no to a lot of things that I thought were good. And
Mm,
it was like people also. I had to say
wow.
no to some of those things because the new dawn was a new creation. The Bible
Mm,
tells us that. I was literally a new creation. I couldn't be put into the wineskins the same way that I was before. I had to be put in to a different wineskin. And so with that, I had to make some really tough decisions. I had to let go. Now, look, that was the hardest part, letting go. Because when you come out of poverty and you learn
mm,
how to survive, and every day
mm,
you wake up and you're just like, I have to survive, right?
mm,
It's hard to let go because you want to control those
mm,
situations. And so for me, I was that control freak that had to finally
mm,
go like this because I was going through life like this, just really tight
mm.
fisted. And Jesus was like, I need you like this so that you
Wow.
can so that you can release that past and step
Wow.
into who I've already created you to be. It's time to step into it.
Wow. Did you find for your own internal demeanor and the way you showed up in the world that that letting go process really changed what you were feeling and what other people were experiencing as you were letting go?
Yeah, you know what? One of the things it allowed for me to do, and I'll talk about this actually in my book, is I started to teach me how to keep my emotions between the lines. Because
Mm.
as a little girl, growing up in the home that I grew up in, emotions were volatile. Emotions were
Yeah.
all over the place. I grew up with an abusive dad. And so
Mm.
anger and all of those emotions that come out, what I got to witness every day was how not to control your emotions
Mm.
and how to always put them on display, but also how to give in to them and make decisions based on feelings. And my feelings weren't always correct, they weren't always
Mm.
truth.
Come on.
And when I came to know the Lord, he taught me that my emotions are not dictators of my future. So it
Come on.
started teaching me how to control those emotions and how to keep those emotions, what I call between the lines. Just like we want to keep
Mm.
our car safely between the
Yes.
lines, I didn't want to end up in the ditch or in a
Wow.
head-on collision, right?
Yes.
Because my emotions got out of line. And so for me, I think the
Wow.
hardest part was keeping my emotions in check.
Wow, that is so helpful because I do think a lot of times our emotions can run the scene. I mean, it doesn't take too long to look around this world and see a whole bunch of emotions are dictating a lot of responses. So tell me, how did you go from this 21-year-old girl who's just learning to let go, who grew up in poverty, now to being a CEO and an author?
Well, when Jesus took the scales off my eyes and I could start seeing things clearly, I started recognizing behaviors that
Mm,
were different than who I was, but also what I had experienced. And
mm,
those behaviors came with peace and calmness, but also with success. And so I started watching people and learning from people and studying what a godly influencer would look like. And so for me, I started just stepping out in faith. I can say that because it was not comfortable.
come
I had to
on.
become really comfortable with being uncomfortable, actually. And so I had to get uncomfortable so that I could step out and start like living the new life. And so
Mm,
here's how it shows up. Because when you're ready, when you tell God, okay, I'm ready and I want to live for you, I want to do things for you, you've got to be prepared
yes.
to step out, just like Peter had to step out of the boat into the water. I had to step out. I just had to have faith and step out. And I am so grateful that I took that plunge and stepped out. Now, look, I also talk about it in my book. There's a lot of failing moments in that. And sometimes we get scared in those moments of failure because we don't want to fail. We have this fear of failure. And so I talk about how to fail forward. And for me, it was giving myself permission to fail forward.
Wow, that's so good. Failing forward. The idea that we are still progressing, even when we fall down, we're still progressing. So tell me, Dawn, in our last few moments here together, what is it that you're doing now and what do you hope for in the future?
So what the Lord has laid on my heart now that I'm so excited about is I am passionate for kingdom women business leaders. These are women who, because that's who I understand, that's who I am. And these are women that are stepping out in faith in what I call workplace ministry. And so they're doing God's work out in the business world. And so that's why I wrote my book that I wrote. That is what I'm doing now. I lead, so currently I'm a regional director for Keller Williams International for the Southeast region. I lead about 17,000 people in this region. So I get the opportunity to test all of these leadership skills every day, but also to lead in faith and to lean on God and to still shape me, because I am not where I need to be.
Come on.
I am not perfected on this side of heaven. We won't be, right? But I'm not where I need to be, but I'm excited every day to wake up and get to explore what God has for me.
Come on, that little girl, if she could just see one day, she'd be leading 17,000 on the daily. It is a remarkable story of what God has done in your life, girl. I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
Well, Dawn, we are so thankful you stopped by Unscripted Faith. We have about 30 seconds. Give us a word of encouragement to the one who is watching and feeling like they'll never come out of the predicament they're in right now.
Yeah, so I would love to lead all of our listeners with the word, one word that's called optimism. And now most people think that optimism is a glass half full. I want to reframe it for you and give you a new definition. I want you to think of optimism as a glass that is overflowing. And the joy of the Lord, digging into his word, leaning into him, allows for us to have a glass that overflows. Because here's what I know. There's going to be hard days. There are going to be days that you got to lean in to the struggles and the challenges. When your glass is overflowing, not only do you have what you need to be able to go through those, but you can also loan it to someone else who may be struggling that day too. So optimism in a world of what we're going through in the world today, right? To have optimism of a glass overflowing is joy. And I want to give everyone that in this season.
Beautiful. Oh, Dawn, thank you so much for that word of encouragement. And thank you for stopping by Unscripted Faith.
My pleasure and honor to be with you guys.
Loved it. My next guest is an author, poet, and podcaster, but she never expected a poem to her daughter that it would start a movement of value and worth. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this short break.
You're one of Cornerstone TV's best donors. You've chosen to support its mission of spreading the gospel through Christian media and its Cornerstone Cares outreach. You love the fact that 10 cents on every dollar goes to feed the hungry, clothe the poor, and more. Problem is, sometimes you forget to send in your pledge. And before you know it, 1 month becomes 2 months, or even 4. There has to be a better way. Don't fixate, automate, and simplify your giving with Easy Pledge. One simple decision can replace 12 choices each year. When you give to Cornerstone TV, sign up to have your monthly gift automated by calling 888-665-4483 or choosing recurring giving online at ctvn.org/donate. Life just got easier, knowing that your gifts to spread the gospel can be more predictable, even when the rest of life isn't. Well done, my friend.
Research shows that attitudes about body image and self-esteem begin forming in children between the ages of 3 and 5. My next guest is an author, poet, and founder of the Kitty Lit Lab and co-founder of Risen Motherhood. But what she didn't realize is that a poem she wrote to her 8-year-old daughter would change her focus. Laura, welcome to Unscripted Faith.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
We are honored to have you. Before we dive into all the things, the poem, and what you're doing today, share with me how you met Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love this question. You know, I am so blessed because I look back and I never knew a day without Christ. I accepted him as my Lord and Savior around 5 years old, but was definitely raised in a Christian home that continued to just share the gospel with me over and over. And I was at an Awanas program. I think that's still around, but a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, will know what Awanas is, but it was just a Christian evening program. They had shared the gospel there, and then I came home that night, and I remember sitting in my kitchen. I was sitting on my dad's lap, and I was just asking him questions about the gospel and what I had learned that night. And so we prayed together, and I remember looking up after we prayed, and I saw my brothers and my mom all brushing their teeth and like cheering for me. They just started clapping, and they were in the midst of brushing their teeth, and it's just a memory I'll never forget.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Not only did you have the heavenly chorus, but you had the toothbrush chorus.
That's right. That's right.
That is amazing. So take me to you gave your life to the Lord, and here you are. You decided to pen a poem to your daughter. What stirred you to write a poem to her?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have always been a writer, studied journalism in college and continued to write. And the Lord has just left me in that path of typically writing for adults. But as time went on, I kind of fell into poetry and sharing some of that online through my Instagram in particularly. And there was just one of these days where my daughter had come home from school, and she just looks at me in all earnestness and says, "Mom, am I beautiful?" And I remember looking at her sort of in shock, because I was like, you are someone who has been raised with nothing but love. Like your dad, your mom, grandparents, aunts, uncles, everyone is like, you're so beautiful, you're so gorgeous, you know, just raised in this really loving home that really I thought was building up her self-esteem. And so to hear her question that was just shocking to me. And of course I responded with, you know, yes, you are so beautiful. You know, you're all these like positive affirmations and things, but it stuck with me, this idea that, wow, my daughter who knows the Lord, who has a Christian family, who is raising her to know true value and worth, and also to believe that her physical appearance is beautiful, is still questioning this.
Wow.
And so I sat down and I wrote this poem, and it's called Dear Daughter. And it just talks about how the world is telling us, hey, go look at musicians, go look at movie stars, go look at these, you know, powerful women in the boardroom, and you should look like them physically, because beauty is power. And, you know, don't worry about the fact that they're corrupt, or don't look at the fact that they are, you know, sharing these lyrics that are terrible, or that they are living lives that aren't honoring to God. But it's all about appearances, because your appearance is what matters. And I just wanted to give a contrary perspective to that, and to remind her, hey, don't look to them, and don't even, as Disney tells us, don't look within. None of those things are solid, but what is solid is the fact that you can look to Christ to determine your worth and value, and that you can trust him, that your worth and value never changes, because he made you and he established that from the beginning of time. And that's something to build your life on. And so I wrote this poem, and it really just surprised me with how well it did. And again, I shared it with adults on social media, and yet it was all these women coming out and saying, I needed these words too. I needed these words too. And so much of the poetry that I write is poetry that I need, even if it's written to a situation that's about my life, but I needed that poem as well. And it's just been incredible to see how much that resonated with women and reminded them of the truth of real beauty.
Wow, I love that you wrote this letter. Now, how old is your daughter now?
She is 10 now. I wrote it when she was about 8 years old.
Oh my goodness. And I'm sure she continually goes back to that poem to remind herself. It's beautiful. You know, I was stunned by the statistics saying that self-image begins at the age of 3 to 5.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's really interesting too, because it seems like what starts happening very, very quickly, no matter what type of, let's say, universe or world that that child is involved in, they start to question their value. And they
Wow.
start to ask, okay, like kids start to compare, right? That's very natural for us as humans is to compare. And they start to see, okay, she's a different size than me, or he looks different. It happens in boys and girls too. And so it's not something that's just for females. But yeah, it starts very, very young. And this was something that I really felt like within, I love the church. I grew up in the church, as I mentioned and shared my testimony. But there hasn't been a lot of teaching on a theology of the body and a theology of beauty. And so that was something with this book that I took this poem and turned into a book called Your Worth Never Wavers that I really wanted to help kids understand, whether they're my daughter or another child reading it out in the world, that they would have a foundation to know that, hey, your beauty and value isn't determined by how you look compared to this other kid or what the kids in the classroom are saying or out in the world, but your value and worth is determined by the God of the universe. And he calls you beautiful because you're made in his image. And so that was the message that I really believe we need to start grounding in our children from that very young age of 3 or 4, when all these outside messages are starting to compete.
Come on, and no doubt your kids are gleaning the beauty of this. Are you noticing, or have there been situations where they've talked with friends or schoolmates that have gotten back to you of them kind of taking what they've learned and they know in the depths of their being now and sharing it with others?
Yeah. I mean, even with that same daughter, I remember it was maybe a year later, and we were chatting, and there was like a pretty scale or a pretty ranking going on at school of who's pretty and who's not. And so it was kind of a similar situation of her coming back to kind of talk to me about that and sharing. And she was a little more light about it. It wasn't as like, oh, I'm questioning my own beauty, but she was kind of like, yeah, this was happening. And I said, well, hey, sweetie, what do you think about that? Like, first of all, do you think this was okay? And then second of all, like, how do you determine that? And she was like, it doesn't matter. I'm God's. He calls me beautiful. And it was just the best. It was very like chill and low key. You kind of blink and you would have missed it. But also I was like, yes, we did it. We did it.
That's exactly right. It is power that it did only take a second of her thinking. It wasn't a whole thing she's now digesting and reliving over and over because she knows who she is. Let's go, Mom. I love it. Now, with this new book, you just released this, right? It's based off of the poem. Have you gotten any stories from the outside world sharing of the impact it's making on their kids?
Yes. It's so fun to hear stories from my readers. It's just like the whole reason that I write children's books. It brings me so much joy to get to hear stories. And a ton of moms have been writing in to just tell me like, hey, this came at a pivotal moment where my daughter needed this encouragement, and we had an incredible conversation afterward. And that's really my hope with all my books, is that, hey, a children's book, you've got, 600, 900 words to be able to share probably a very big truth. But it's so fun to hear how parents are using these as springboards to conversations with their own children. And you can just see the kids' wheels turning as they start to say, okay, like that's not actually how I thought of beauty. I thought of beauty as something physical, and it is. There's very real things that God has made us to appreciate beauty and value that. We can look at that in creation and the way that he has just spent so much time and care on a sunset and things like that. And so there is a natural sense in us to want to pursue and look at beauty. But when we're talking about conventional human standards of beauty, that's what we want to turn upside down and help children see, but that is not where your value is. Because it is true that humans, some of them have been blessed with a greater measure of beauty. We don't want to deny that, right? The Bible talks about that with Esther, talks about David being handsome, talks about Ruth, like all these biblical characters. The Bible points out that they are beautiful. So it's not something that we should deny or act like isn't real. But the problem that we want to break is this connection that, okay, beauty equals value. And that is not the truth. Conventional beauty equals value, but instead our value is set, and Christian version of beauty is the fact that we are made and growing in Christ likeness, and we are showing the world who he is and continuing to show his goodness and truth and kindness and goodness to the world and growing in that type of beauty.
Come on, that's the truth. Now, did you ever struggle, Laura, with body issues or image?
Yeah, I mean, of course. This is, again, every poem is a little bit preaching to my own heart. And so if you go check my poetry on Instagram, or I have a poetry book coming out next year, there's a whole section on body image. And this is just something that, again, I mentioned this earlier, but the church didn't necessarily do a lot of work around teaching a good theology of the body or even beauty. And so I was raised very traditionally in that sense of, hey, we want to be thin, and we want to, cover up anything that's undesirable. And I really had to do a lot of work over the years to see makeup and clothing and working on my body as more something that are two things. One, from a Christian perspective, it's stewardship. Right?
Yeah.
Exercise, what we eat, how we care for our body is not so that we can look fabulous to the world and be told you're gorgeous, but is actually so that we can serve God better.
Yeah.
I'm quicker to jump off the couch. I have a daughter with disabilities. I can carry her 60 pounds because I lift weights. And so those are things that's why we want to pursue some of those things, is not for our looks, but is so that we can serve others better. And then second, we can see things like makeup and hair and clothes as a way to play and have fun, as an artistry, the same way that we emulate God in so many things. He's, as a creator, he's creative. And so when I was able to sort of put it in some of those categories, instead of saying, well, I'm moralizing, oh, today I overate, or today I look ugly, or today I'm bloated, or whatever it is. And I'm like, and I am now bad, right? That's sort of the female narrative, is I overate, therefore I am bad. To stop connecting those two things, and to be able to instead be able to say, no matter what, I am found righteous and good in God's eyes because of Jesus' sacrifice on the cross for me. And so I don't have to have my worth wavering all the time, the title of my book, because it's steadfast in Jesus no matter what happens. So therefore I can pursue right living. I can have fun with makeup out of an overflow of the joy of the life that God has given me, not because of my value.
Wow, that is so, so good. Laura, I'm so thankful that you chose to write that poem to your daughter, and that you chose to turn it into a children's book, and that you're continuing to share with all of us, young and old alike, that our value is unchanging because it's defined by the one who created us. Laura, thank you so much for being with us today on Unscripted Faith, and thank you for all that you are doing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. What a powerful message. He is unwavering. He created you. The value he has assigned to you doesn't change, because he's the one who is unchanging, and he decided it. So today, if you're lacking some confidence, or you're struggling with your image, or maybe even you find yourself scrolling, unaware, comparing your life to someone else's, guess what? There's only one of you. And there's only one of you who can show up in the world like God designed. Your value and your worth is not dictated by what you look, what you do, or what you have. It is defined by the one who designed you, and he calls you good, beautiful daughter and son.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.